a little unmute when you can.
Being muted. I hate being muted. I should never be muted.
I've always said so.
No, the only person who will mute himself in this talk is myself. So
no muting. I'm muting. Hey, Drennen.
Hello, and congrats again on that New Yorker mention. That was pretty sweet.
Oh, yeah, nice, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking, I have to say.
I didn't see that. I'll have to take a look at everything. So,
Brian, you don't have a Google alert for everything that happens to me?
That's what Craig
I am.
Is here.
My name is Google Alert.
Craig is my Google alert for everything that happens to you, because also he's the one who introduced me to your work and everything. So we're just, today is very relaxed conversation, and I wanted to talk about like the current shows here, but also your shows in New York and basically what's like on your minds. But I first, just wanted to like quickly, introduce this like, Steve's show here. It's called The Daily Practice of Painting, and comprises of 114 male portraits that you made between 2019 and 2020. And you have a current show up at Alexander Gray, which is titled Your Blues Ain't Like Mine. And that's also on view until like December 17th. And Craig, your show here is a revival of sorts, combining works from the beginning of the Timon of Athens series, which you started in 2008, to the most recent works, Chorus T, or T, dealing with the main character, Timon, as 2022. So about 15 years worth of work. And you have a show up right now in New York at Freight and Volume, Merchant, Mistress, and Tea, which Steve wrote an excellent essay. I just had to reread it yesterday for this. That was, writing to aspire to. So,
it's a brilliant show, and I just hope I came up to the level of the show. Craig is one of my favorite painters. Like, even though he's my friend and I've sort of been stuck with him for the majority of my life, he really is. Really, there's.
That's very kind.
Well, no, I've always been a little bit inspired by the level of attention in your work and this commitment to what oil painting can do and what it can be. It's very rare to see that, where the work is presented very matter-of-factly, without irony, without any sort of like jab in the ribs sort of thing. Like, what you see is what you see, and that belief that oil painting can still provide that to a viewer, that's really inspiring. That's an inspiring sort of position to have in this sort of contemporary world.
Well, that is beautiful. Thank you very much, Steve.
So, I remember when I first met you, Steve, it was, and Craig will have to help me with the year, you came to Georgia State to speak to Craig's class. And Craig was kind enough to invite me in on that. And I got to hear you talk about your job as an educator and everything. But more importantly, can y'all talk about when you all first met?
Oh, Jesus.
I remember it very well. I think that lecture date was Valentine's Day, 2014, I think, or 13 or 14. I can't remember, but it was very snowy. Steve arrived in a blizzard in Atlanta. There was actually snow on the ground,
which was really cute. It was really cute. Coming from Michigan, the Atlanta blizzard was very cute.
I know. I met Mr. Steve Locke in 2006 when I was a participant at Skowhegan, and Steve was my dean there. So I got to know him that way, and talked to him every chance I got, including every meal, I would always try to sit at his picnic table and sort of hear what he was saying, because from my point of view, I wasn't used to hearing any artist speak as broadly and articulately and sort of sensitively about such a broad range of different practices that Steve did. And so that's what pulled me in, like, right away. I became an instant fan. And I remain so to this day, and I'm very happy with the accolades his exhibition at Alexander Gray Associates has been getting.
It's funny, when Craig was like Skowhegan, this is almost 20 years ago now. It's such a long time ago, but when we were there, it was a very sort of removed from the sort of digital world, right? Social media wasn't as big as it is now, and it still was kind of insular, right? So there was a lot of time to like look at what other people were doing. And Craig, we were working on Supergirl.
Yeah, I was finishing up. I was at the tail end of the Supergirl project I worked on for about 5.5 years.
And I went to your studio and I'd seen the models for the paintings.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, I was like, holy God, this guy is like recreating the world. He's recreating everything in oil paint. It was like this sort of insane kind of, well, I don't want to say insane. Like
No, you were correct the first time.
Well, this really kind of extreme still life painting, right?
Yeah,
that's how I was thinking of it. It's really amazing. And I'm trying to think who else was there that year. There's a very interesting bunch of people that year, and some of whom were interested in other things, like social practice things. And I remember that guy who built the house that everybody was supposed to like had a residency in the residency.
Yeah.
And like even
Jason Mortara. Yep.
Right. And even the way you intervened in that project, right, was to sort of occupy it in a way, like apply for a residency and then create another residency within the residency, right? You know, it was one of those things where it was a bit of sending up what the sort of conceit of the project was, but it also like just completely destroying the sense of exclusivity that was posited by that project.
Absolutely right. And, Jason, if he's listening ever, will confirm these details, but he built a miniature house on site as a residency within the Skowhegan residency. And so I applied and was accepted to that. And then I just made a little micro residency. I had a chair residency where you could like get a residency just in sitting in the chair for like, 4 hours if you wanted to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway,
really amazing.
It was I guess that's what I do. I intervene into these existing systems.
Right.
By the way, Steve's, are you upstate?
No. I'm teaching.
You're in Brooklyn?
Week. I'm in Brooklyn this week. I had critiques with my lovely students this week. So
I see. Yeah. Well, Steve's in Brooklyn. I'm in a hotel lobby elsewhere in Brooklyn. My room's not ready yet, so I'm in the lobby recording this. Which might make me like the best performance from a hotel lobby since Dirk Bogarde and Death in Venice.
Oh my God, I love that movie.
Yeah, and I'm in another city that starts with B, Blacksburg, but
yeah, there we go.
Little ways away. Well, you kind of answered like some of my questions about what it is that sparked like the friendship, but also it brings attention and visibility how artists, friendships and communication between artists creates their own community and sustains careers and practices, which both Steve and Craig, you've done so, one, and just sharing your work with each other, but also writing essays and understanding through over a long period of time. So you were working on a Supergirl at that time, Craig, and then what we have
an image from Supergirl.
Yeah, I know. I saw, and I got one from Painter for the Timon of Athens in here. So in 2008, Craig, you started on Timon of Athens, and could you say a little about how you jumped from one series to another, or ended one series? And began.
Well, I think it was before that, Craig, because I was in Savannah when you showed me the first Mistress, right?
I believe that was 2008. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was Craig invited me down to Savannah College of Art and Design where he was teaching, and I was there for a semester. I had a residency there, and was making a lot of sort of grid-based work at that time, right? It was great. And one day he came to my studio and he said, "I want to show you something." And we were in where my studio was sort of where the graduate studios were. And Craig took me into this room and like turned on the lights, and one of the mistresses was there. And I think it had that like black line painted on with it, right? And I was so shocked and so excited at the same time to have seen that work. And I think that was like, because all I had seen before was Supergirl. That's all the only work I'd seen before. And so like to go from that to figuration, and then to go to the abject, and then to go to portraiture, all in like one, and then this sort of weird modernist claiming of the wall space with that black line.
Right.
It was so much all at once. And I remember I just hugged you, and I just like, I said, I cannot believe you did this. I can't believe it.
Well, I do remember that. And one of the things I always liked about Steve's work, and why he was always such a good role model for me, was his ability to move from project to project, style to style. And so for me, I sort of have this premise, but the Timon of Athens, provides a prompt that, sort of allows me to, be intuitive in my own way, and sort of populate this imaginary world with characters. So that's how it started, Brian, to answer your question very directly. And I had finished the Supergirl project, and I wanted something that was a little further away in time. I felt like that would give me a little more room to maneuver, something that seemed even more ridiculous and more absurd in its own way. And I liked that it was both a strong sign and a weak sign simultaneously. It was, Shakespeare, strong sign, but Timon of Athens, nobody had heard of, so it was weak. And so that combination of strength and weakness always feels like home to me, and so that's the platform that I like to rise up, out of.
Mm-hmm. Well, then that brings up the topic of one, portraiture deals with Steve's work, but also vulnerability, or portraiture in the history of representation of power. Mm-hmm. And Steve, could you kind of talk a little bit about your approach to portraiture in that regard? It's its history, and basically maybe using the question of what you ask for other artists that I heard in a conversation is what is at stake today? Painting portraits in 2022.
It's a weird thing, Brian, because the history of power is sort of communicated through portraiture. In something as simple as who's on the money. You know what I mean? That's about portraiture and power. That's about the sort of inflection of state power. And we have a picture. There's so many paintings of the king because there needed to be one in every county so people would know who the king was, right? And so that understanding that to image people in a particular way is linked to their status, who gets to have their portrait painted. And that became such a weird question with the advent of photography, because now everybody could have a portrait done, and it could be a portrait done with almost an immediate recognizable likeness with considerably less labor. And you could probably distribute it faster, So when that starts to happen, what happens to portrait painting? It becomes kind of like a bigger class signifier, right? It becomes like this thing you do for Nana on her 80th birthday. Everybody gets together and they hire some hired gun to paint Nana's portrait, paint a portrait of the whole family, and that will hang in the living. It's that kind of thing, right? But it's not. It's no longer a sense of it's even less a sense of something that's accessible to everyone else, right? So I wanted to be a portrait painter when I was a kid. That was the job I wanted. I wanted to be like, I also wanted to be the guy who drew the federal duck stamps.
Oh, nice.
I wanted that job too. I thought that was like such a great job. But over time, I started to realize that like, if I was going to paint people, that the minute I put a painting of a person, particularly a man, on a surface, it entered into that dialogue about power, right? And I started to wonder what place did I want to have in that dialogue, Because I could have gone this route of like making these sort of kitsch paintings of Black people as if they were powerful, right? Like painting them in the same sort of manner in which Rubens painted them, right? And that is somewhat interesting, but it's not, to me, it wasn't sustainable. And, Black people are already noble, so I didn't have to do anything to make them noble. Like, I didn't see my job as a painter to repair something, right?
Mm.
I just got more interested in thinking about different ways to frustrate the reading of power in a portrait of a man. I just got very interested in that. And that's where the sort of sticking out the tongue thing came from. Because, I mean, yeah, I could paint people naked, but, Sylvia Slay already took care of that, right? Mm-hmm. So how do I make a painting of a man that is in that sort of register of portraiture, but also make them somehow impotent or less able to access power? That's where the whole thing came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in your current show here, The Daily Practice of Painting, there's 114 portraits that are lined up on a rail, just resting below eye level. Mm-hmm. And they, you said that you wanted to represent or to give the feeling of the episodic.
Right.
Could you expand on that?
It's really funny the way that the sort of the format of the work is they're square paintings and they're about 6 by 6 inches, right? Mm-hmm. And they take about a day, sometimes a little bit less than a day. And I was doing them as, I don't believe in exercises or practices or stuff like that. That's just my work, and it's something I was doing every day to keep connected to how I could invent within a given set of parameters, like the size of the support, the colors that were chosen, and how am I going to get to likeness, expression, and flesh given these parameters. So they felt episodic because I didn't go back and do the same thing every day. Like every day there was a new set of parameters as I approached each picture. And so they start to have a different sensibility about each one of them. Some of them feel heavy-handed. Some of them feel quick. Some of them are really opaque and dense. Some of them are barely even there, but it's understanding that, the how we encounter flesh, how we encounter skin is so much contingent on what's available to us, right? Mm-hmm. So how do I make flesh based on the colors that are available to me? And that was the thing that started to feel really episodic. And then I could bring that into the other work and think about the way the light is different inside of a movie theater versus at a football game, and how that affects the flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I recall that, just to jump in, I recall when I saw the paintings upstairs at the Moss Art Center, I was reminded by a fresco that Steve had done on the Fresco Barn at Skowhegan, which was gridded depictions of a male portrait again and again, and there was a sort of a assurance and a kind of a relaxed precision of touch that I think that Fresco sort of demands in some way. Mm-hmm. But I remember seeing that in Steve's fresco, and then being surprised by it, because there's sort of a quick kind of tenderness to the depiction, and then when I saw the stuff at the Moss Art Center, and then when I saw the show at Alexander Gray Associates, it just, all that sort of accumulated, about just what sensitivity looks like, and all these different emotional notes that the same ingredients can hit, just like an actor, and Steve has a little bit of background in acting, right, Steve? Or did I imagine that?
No, a little bit. I wanted to be an actor, but I just I just wasn't very good. You know what I mean? I think I was okay. I just wasn't very good, and so I sort of abandoned that as a career path. And plus, I don't think I was old. I think if I was a little bit more mature, I could have done it. But it just seemed like such a strange and fraught profession. You know what I mean? Depending on so many outside things. And I thought, well, maybe I should just be a painter because I can control all these other things in my environment. Yeah.
Well, my wish and goal and hope for you is that you get both some acting credits and a duck stamp on your resume, before it's all over.
I still would love to do a federal duck stamp if they're listening. I still would love to do that.
We'll make sure to put that the hashtags when we post this and everything. And so, excuse me. So so it'd be good to talk about like material, and with Craig, I mean, you have made a choice to use oil. Mm-hmm. And for all your paintings, and for the same thing that Steve was talking about, with even though different with conveying like flesh and more of like realism, representation, so things that only oil can do, but also in the tradition of painting. Can you talk about like your choice of material, oil painting, and why you came to that decision?
Well, for me, so much about the Timon of Athens project is me sort of quietly, in a deadpan way, sneaking into the canon, and going someplace where I'm not supposed to go. And so oil paint was just part of this sort of historic canonized fetishization that painting and the discourse of painting, the history of painting, seem to encourage. And if you talk to a bunch of painters, like, they do it too, like even contemporary painting. And so I wanted to be a practitioner within painting, but I never sort of fetishized the materials and processes in the same way. So for me, it was all just a means to an end. But I do also, if I'm being 100% honest, I think that oil paint, if I was shooting a film right now, I would want to get the best camera, the best light kits, and for me, like, oil paint is still, for that kind of picture where you encapsulate a lot of different times and you're dependent on the artist's touch. Oil paint is still really good at that. Like, I'm not, I don't know that I've seen anything that's way better than that yet. So, and so that was part of it. And as an aside, the fluorescent paint that occasionally shows up, it shows up in the tea pieces, and a few others, but the fluorescent paint, they don't even make it in oil paint. I have to have it custom made because all the paint manufacturers, again, who are, responding to the needs of painters. And again, this fetishized discourse, the history of oil painting, doesn't have a place for fluorescent orange. But to me, that's why I wanted to use it, because it's an outsider. Like, it doesn't have a history. It doesn't have an art historical history and practice. And so for me, that makes it really useful. But I have to have it custom made because other manufacturers want to do that.
Mm-hmm. And then and then he goes ahead and makes it look like acrylic.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes I do.
Astonishing, it's like, I know it's oil paint, but it looks like this other material. So it starts to be in this dialogue with, process painting or something like that. But it's really just, it's back in the conversation about illusion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the medium that allows you to like embody the glossary of like painting techniques. Is like
for sure.
And so that I mean, could you like explain the parallel with performance, or how each of these different techniques becomes like a different actor? In that.
Well, I mean, sure. I think that again, I think this is something that Steve and I both share, and it's why I always sort of instantly responded to his work. But for me, like whenever I start a new character, I do sort of piece it together. You know, it takes a minute. Like it doesn't just happen instantly, and I don't get it right the first time. So it takes maybe 6 months, maybe longer, maybe a full year to kind of get the character set and understood. But I like to pull in, some intuitive associations. I mean, it's never didactic, and I'm never sort of trying to narrate this play. I am just populating it with one additional sort of surprising, unexpected, pictorial device after another. And so for each one, I do kind of settle in and, think about, I'm not an actor, but I just a touch of acting training and an acting coach who was very kind and gave me some advice a few times. But I try to go to like sense memory, and I try to go to, a little bit of a backstory, or what emotional note is this character trying to hit. And they're all a little different, which for me, going through the list of characters, it's almost like finding an accordion that was really squeezed tight and then pulling it apart to find what more additional emotional notes I can find, and that might be the case because I grew up in a part of the country where, especially for men, the emotional range tended to be a pendulum that swung back and forth between humor and anger, and then humor again, and then more anger. And it kind of went back and forth like that. And so for me, just finding another kind of emotional resting state for each character, it was really important. One that's like funny, but a little sad. One that's mean and overly clever. One that's just quiet and happy, like, and so forth, like trying to find like all these different spots. And so I do make notes, and I do try to get the work to do that. Like I do try to hit a different emotional note with each character.
And that emotional, this, you could segue to kind of talk about like emotional memory, and how for the viewer is like how that's sometimes ways of connecting with the work, of seeing the work, and it not, I don't think trigger is the best word, but it makes the viewer feel. And I want to talk to you, Steve, about share like one of the nice things about experiencing here with both the shows and the work is we are the cultural center for this whole New River Valley region. And one of the things is one day, the performances, and then there's matinees of all these K-12 kids that come in and see a matinee, and then they come through the galleries, and we break them up in tours because there's only so many you can have.
Right.
And one day, we had like 136 fifth graders come through your show in different groups. And the thing that they connected to was the emotions they felt looking. Now, of course, them being fifth graders, the works were actually above them. So, yeah. So yet the things they were saying is like, they were wondering, is like, they sense like anxiety in the faces.
They're very smart fifth graders, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I guess, and since I'm not their teacher, I observed and let the teacher lead the discourse. But I was just like, how would you talk about your work to a fifth grader?
Like, I mean, my experience as a teacher around children all the time, when I was I was teaching at Mass Art, and I was teaching in a teacher training program. And so that was a big discussion about, how do you talk to kids about contemporary art? It's because the art it's for them. Like the contemporary art is for, like, what did Wu-Tang is for the children. You know what I mean? It really is.
Nice.
It's for them. It's not I'm interested in a sort of longer dialogue from my work, of course, but this is their time, and this is work that's being made in their time. So they really are the audience for it. So with kids, you do the normal thing that you do. What you do with kids is you say, what do you see? What do you say?
Mm-hmm.
That's
mm-hmm.
the sort of visual thinking strategies question that we ask children when they come into an art space, and it allows children to like talk about what is in front of them, to be sort of formal about the work. I see men, I see rectangles, I see color, I see happy faces, I see, and then what do you say about that? And I think that it do that with Drennen's work. Like, what do you see? What do you say?
Mm-hmm.
I see the letter T, I see all this sort of stuff. And then you allow them to have their own experience of unpacking it. I think the hard thing about art and children is that we think that children are stupid, and they're not.
Oh, they're so not.
Yeah,
not at all. Yeah.
They hear everything we say. They listen to their parents. They, overhear their parents' phone conversations. They're very sophisticated listeners and very sophisticated viewers. And they also have very complex interior lives that we as adults really can only, we have a memory of what that was like. We don't have access to it anymore. So I love when children see the work, because sometimes they get scared, or they get anxious, or they get happy, because they're having their own authentic experience of encountering other people. Like, you don't have that kind of emotional response to a picture of like Ronald McDonald. You know what I mean? There's something that is in my work, because it is in portraiture. It does have some connection to an existing person. And it's my job to bring that connection forward so that someone other than me can see it, right? Mm-hmm. So when kids respond to the work that way, that just means I did my job, because they're not even thinking about me anymore, Brian. They're thinking about themselves and their own relationships with people.
Yeah.
I'm not even in the equation anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, way back when I lived in New York, one of the many hundreds of jobs that I had was I was a teaching artist for DIA in their like studio and a school style program, and I would go in and do projects with sixth grade classes, and I had different schools that I was assigned to work with at all different kind of economic scale for the students, and in every case, and we'd bring them to the shows at DIA, and your audience probably knows DIA, like a strong proponent of minimalism, conceptual art, expanded forms, and so on. And the sixth graders, in all my time doing it, they never had a problem with the work.
Right.
Like, sometimes the teachers I would have to manage maybe just a little bit, manage the teachers around some of the issues, but the kids never had a problem. They were full on. Like, you didn't have to worry about, Dan Graham. Why did Dan Graham put this glass structure on the top of DIA on 22nd Street? Why did Joseph Beuys plant a tree next to a rock on 20 outdoors? Right. Like, they like made sense. Like, kids got it right away.
Well, I think that the world of childhood is so bizarre anyway, that like children accept the most bizarre things in contemporary practice. Like, oh, look, there's a house in the middle of this art place. Like in Detroit, there's Mike Kelly's mobile.
Oh, yes.
Instead of Detroit, and kids go through that place all the time. And like, there's a house that's 3/4 the size of an actual house. Like, children have an automatic understanding of what it means to shrink something down to a manageable portion, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a way in which we don't give children enough credit for their ability to decode complex thoughts, because we don't think children are capable of complex thought, and they are. They are.
This is reminding me. Maybe, Brian, I don't want to digress too much here, but if you permit, it reminds me of. It reminds me of a lecture I heard years ago by David Nagel, who was an art critic in Los Angeles, I think for the LA Times, among other places. And he had a funny response, because he's an art critic, and when he would go, he was telling a story. He was recounting like all the times he's been institutions for like public evenings or openings or whatever, and having somebody come up and say to him that old line, it's like, oh, my kid could do that.
Oh,
and he said that his response always back, but he's like, would your kid love to do that? He's like, so why not, like, would this be something your kid would love? It's like, not just could they do it, but would they love it? And if the answer is still yes, then probably it's interesting as a work of art.
Right.
And so it was just funny, like how he, people came up to just kind of be like a little, like, politely obnoxious to him in public. And then he would just kind of like catch it and then boomerang it right back to them. And they didn't have a response. They're like, oh, yeah, maybe my kid would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah. I mean, I'm glad that kids are being brought through. I wish I had been brought through. I grew up in a part of the country where there were no museums or galleries, and I think I was either 20 or 21 before I first went to a museum, the National Gallery of Art. I might have been 20 years old on a school trip.
That's a damn shame.
Yeah.
I grew up in Detroit, Craig. We were in the Detroit Institute of the Arts every chance we could get.
I mean, which is a gorgeous building and a gorgeous collection.
Collections, and like that, that's my patrimony. Like, so when people say like, oh, I don't feel comfortable in museums, or I wasn't allowed in museums, I just look at them like they're crazy.
It is crazy.
I grew up in Detroit. Like, every kid in Detroit went to that museum at least 4 times during their education.
Yeah.
And it's like this idea that things are inaccessible to people, or that they're not for people, has always struck me as kind of nutty, because who's served by that attitude?
Right.
Like, where did that come from, and who benefits from people thinking that way about culture?
Right.
And we are actually located in the area that Craig came from.
Close.
We're close.
Right.
But this, this center, the Moss Art Center, didn't exist until 2013.
Oh my!
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And now the arts at Virginia Tech started in 1950. And through the architecture school that started because I guess the architecture students needed to learn how to draw better.
Well, yeah, there is that.
But it was a nice surprise for me. And one of the reasons that interested me in coming here was there was a longer history of visual arts, performing arts here than there ever was at Georgia Tech, which is another school I went to. And Craig knows, I mean, all our experience, because Atlanta is my hometown and I grew up in Atlanta. Yet really, it's like there were museums. I went to the High Museum when I was growing up, but I never really saw galleries or contemporary galleries.
Right.
I didn't see contemporary work. It wasn't until I decided I didn't want to be an engineer and wanted to be an artist and went to Chicago that the Art Institute of Chicago, just going in there every single day, like walking through, because you used to be able to cut through to go to class in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about memory after this, because I know both of it deals with each of your works. Craig, with how you would memorize things. With me, with the museum, I would memorize where all the different pieces were as I walked through, and then notice how often they change things. And really, that was how I learned how to curate, not knowing it.
Right, but, absolutely, yeah.
And Brian is being very modest right now, because he ended up founding and directing a gallery called Saltworks in Atlanta that turned out to be one of the best galleries in the whole Southeast. I think it's not just me saying that. That'll be everyone.
That's
will agree.
Well known. It's well known. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
Well, it killed my studio practice. As you know, it's a daily commitment. Requires a lot of labor every day to make art.
All the time, it takes a special person to run a gallery, especially a commercial art gallery. It's a very hard job, and gallerists get sort of because of a couple of unscrupulous gallerists that are in the art world. Gallerists get sort of depicted as somehow like they're evil or that they're parasites or something. But if you wanted to see contemporary art in 1950, you did not go to a museum. Nope.
Right.
The Dwan Gallery or someplace like that.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Or sure. Something like that. So the relationship between galleries and the newest art is as long as there have been artists. And so they're really important sort of sites of contact.
And they're free. They're always free, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking right now of that Rene Ricard line, one of his essays from the early 80s. To artists, like talking about gallerists, like because artists are always complaining about, what gallerist this, gallerist that. And then Rene Ricard's response to the artist was, listen, eventually you just have to trust someone.
Right.
Like, and you have to trust this person, like to be your advocate and to have your best interests. And I mean, you have to, like, you can't just be paranoid and suspicious and kind of, all that, whatever mental broth people bring to sort of discussions of contemporary art, or contemporary, commercial gallery, but you have to trust people. And the gallerists that I've worked with have been really hardworking people. They weren't, wildly, lavishly living with inherited wealth or anything like that. They were working. They were working every day, like trying.
It was a job. It was their job.
It's very much a job.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Or they had some wealth when they started.
And then less.
You don't have it anymore.
That's the old line. Hey, starting a gallery is a great way to have a small fortune, especially if you start with a large fortune.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's but I would just I do want to talk about, to get back on memory, when how it plays into both of your work, especially it's like with the idea of presence.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve, I wanted to, start with you. It's like the idea of acknowledgement when it comes to, because the series that we have here was made concurrently, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the homage to the auction block,
mm-hmm.
and your memorials, the 3 deliberate grays for Freddie, memorial for Freddie Gray, and how, I just kind of wanted you to talk about the connections between each of these works, and how it's like creating these works and using like a modernist language of color memorializes people and the relationships between race and modernism, and how that came about and through like color theory.
What's so weird, like you have this sort of embodied relationship to color theory. Like I studied it, like everybody else did, like you did, like Craig did, like we all had to do the Albers color classes. I think that they were still teaching them when a youngster like you, Brian, was in school. But when I think about it sometimes, and I think that well, first of all, I want to say that memory is I don't really trust memory. I think it's kind of suspicious and slippery. I like to think about history more than I like to think about memory, because I think history is sort of something that we have in common. Like we can talk about things that happened. And history allows you to be positional somewhat, like people who believe history and people who don't, right? And so with Auction Block, that was like a sort of historical intervention as a public memorial. And I don't want to confuse it with public art, because it wasn't a public artwork. It was a public memorial, which is a little bit different than a public artwork. And it was acknowledging something that was known, but wasn't talked about. Like it was a part of history that was an open secret, but nobody would talk about it, which is why I think so much of the backlash against it happened, because there are some people who don't want to remember themselves in that way. They have problems with, they want to think of themselves as better than they were in the past, or they're sort of judging people in the past by the standards of today. And so that work, because I was thinking about the history, I started thinking about the history of a particular form, right? Like, what is it about the rectangle that became the most efficient form for trafficking people? Like, what is it about that? How did that come about? That became interesting to me. And then, when you're trying to make a public object, you have to do plans and drawings and stuff like that. And the sort of like what Drennen was saying about the intuitive, like the sort of recognizing that this form I was drawing looked like something else in art history. And then thinking about like the efficiency with which enslavement was carried out. That's, I say this to people all the time, Brian, like someone did the math to figure out exactly how many people you could fit on a boat in a given space. Like someone did that math, right? Someone like measured the boat, then they measured a person, and then they figured all that sort of stuff out. In addition to being kind of obscene, that's modernism. That's efficient, right? And so applying that efficiency to that's at the core of modernism, that efficiency, and then marrying that to the notion that you have the modern world because of the theft of all these people and their forced labor. Like I try to get my students to understand that picking cotton is so hard that you have to kidnap people from another continent and force them to do it.
Yeah.
That's how difficult the labor is. And so in Auction Block, I wanted to talk about the things that I loved, which is the modern world, modernism and Albers, and talk about their relationship to their own history without judgment, without saying Albers is bad, or without saying because it's not a Manichaean thing. It's like both of these things are happening at the same time. So we have both of them, right? And to be a Black American is to live with both of those things, to live with the wonder and greatness of America and with its bloody history. We live with both of those things. We don't pretend that both of those things aren't true at the same time, right? And with Freddie Gray, like I said to you before, Black people are already noble. They don't need me to make them noble. That's not a thing that I'm required to do. But I wanted to remember Freddie Gray in a way that had nothing to do with his image and more to do with a sense of him, right? And I wanted to do that publicly in a neighborhood that, is mostly Black and brown people in Boston, right? And so that got me to thinking about distillation and how his name was Freddie Gray. It's a very simple thing, like what color is Freddie Gray? And that's sort of trying to figure out what that color was. And that's how that piece came about. It's just a really simple sort of idea of thinking about, if I could make a color called Freddie Gray, what would it be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was something, and I'll just say with my experience with it, I was not able to see the piece in person, and I've only seen it online. But looking at that was something to where the history of your choices in creating those three grays added so much, but it was the efficiency of it that made it so powerful, of coming up with a monochrome that depicted when he was most alive, the instance, the event that changed his life when he was being arrested, and then his last experience of life. And you use those three photos to come up with those monochromes. That then going back and looking at the image, it made that efficiency even more powerful. Of that, and I guess that's the promise of modernism. in a way.
But this is the thing, this whole notion that somehow the color and that rectangular form doesn't have meaning, or that it's neutral. That's always been nutty. We always thought that, what's her name? Anna Chave, Minimalism and the Rhetoric of Power. You know that essay? She talked about how crazy it was to think that like this is a neutral steel box. Like, really? That's kind of nuts to even say that, right? So it was always a lie at the heart of it, because it always had form, and that form always had color, and that color always had meaning, you know? But I think that in Three Deliberate Grays, it's so, and it's on the front of that beautiful Renzo piano building that is a sort of a paean to modernism with all those rectangular copper panels, right? So it's just reiterating the form of the building. Yeah. I love modernism. It's like a nice sweater. Like, I love it.
And I wanted to, all right, so another thing, and this would kind of tie like Craig into this, and it was I reread your essay that you wrote on Craig, you know, I'll be your mirror. And reading that, and just I'll say, you know, you started off with Lou Reed's like quotes like, I'll be your mirror, reflect what you are in case you don't know. I'll be the wind, the rain, and the sunset, the light on your door to show you that you're home, as a way of talking about reflection and that notion of you know, what happens when the mirror doesn't reflect the viewer. That was the first time when I made the connection of like thinking of the scale and the repetition of your work, of all the portraits of walking through. Like, if I was one to have a compact mirror and open it up and look at it, or if I was walking through the hall of mirrors and with that seriality, but also that instance of where it's like you're trying to see yourself, or am I seeing myself, but not seeing, and the tension that comes with that. Is that just a complete like coincidence on my part of like projecting that, or does mirroring have like some history in your work as well, as the way you were talking about with Craig's?
You know, I mean, just because of my training in self-portraiture, like I spent a lot of time looking in a mirror. Like, but that's I think I was like captivated by what you were saying, because I've never thought of my work that way. I think that's really interesting, but I've never, and you know, sometimes like Craig wrote a wonderful essay about my work actually too, back when I had a show in Boston, and he talked about how he could see the relationship between self-portraiture and all the people I was painting. You know, sometimes if you can't figure out how to do something when you're making a painting, you rely on your own face to solve that problem. So I think that some of that does come across. I don't think it's conscious. It's conscious now that you brought it up, but I think it's I can't say that it's not there. Absolutely, I think it might be there.
Yeah. So that brings me to the other thing with like, I think that connection became because of the scale of the reel that you talked about and talking about with Craig's work. And I was like, Craig, I wanted, you know, to kind of ask about the scale of the reel. Would you said the impact of the reel?
The impact of the reel, at the scale of the reel that lasts longer than the reel. And that was what I sort of said that once when people ask, like, why don't you just glue down Polaroids onto your server? Like, why not just use collage? You'll get there quicker. And so that was my response, is that I have no, I have no ideological problem with collage. It's fine. It's just that, you know, if I could speak bluntly, like I'd sort of given up on my time. Like I'd given up on anybody's sort of, any interest in my work or any sort of, sustained activity, or feedback as an artist. So I just didn't think it was going to happen, while I was alive. I'm happy that a few drops of it has happened, but it really came from that. I'm like, okay, this work is going to have to last much longer because, nobody's really looking at it now. And so I thought, all right, glues, adhesives, and I researched it, like how long, like what's it mean in industry standard? If they say like carpet glue is permanent, that usually means like 7 to 9 years. And I was like, that's not going to be nearly long enough. So I needed something that was just going to last longer. And so that was me. That was what brought me into representation in that kind of way, is because I just wanted it to last longer than any glue or adhesive would last. And I never trusted, and people say, yeah, but just do it and somebody else will do conservation later. I never for 1 second believed anybody was going to take care of my work and sort of care for it.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely not. So that I have to do it. Like I have to be the one that cares for it. So that was the whole reason for that.
But I also think it's really kind of incredible, right? Like, coming from where you come from, Craig, we're both like working class people.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this notion that I would make something and I just assume that someone would be charged at some point to take care of it.
Yeah.
Like that never occurred to me in my entire life. And
me neither. No.
Fascination with people who really think that what they make is really worthy of that kind of attention. Never have thought. Yeah.
Same. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, also, I'd have to, Craig, and this would kind of go back to when we were talking about younger people coming to see the show and then having more problems with adults when they come and they look at the work. When some of the art students who are here, like looking at the work, or college students, it's like some were taken aback by the first breadcrumb of the Mistress series.
Right.
Yet what disarmed them or made them slow down, open up, was when they were thinking like you had just taped it on there. It was the fact when they realized that it was painted, that somebody made this commitment to labor and time and successfully connected to this real and scale. I mean, but it was also the scale and the ability of oil to do this, that they stopped and they opened, like they gave it some space.
Well, I tell you, there's a critic and curator who I really like, Glenn Adamson, and he put together an exhibition and a catalog called Spectacular Craft, and he set up such an interesting premise, which is like now, like in the 21st century, as one individual artist, how can you possibly compete with Pixar, Industrial Light and Magic, Marvel Comics Universe? Like, how can you possibly compete? It used to be that one like Velázquez could produce the most compelling, striking, memorable image of his whole culture. Grunwald could do it, Polykleides could do it, back in the day. But now we're in an era where one individual cannot compete with these other cultural engines to produce spectacle. The only place where spectacle is possibly available to an individual artist is through extraordinary craft.
Right.
And so I sort of, I guess I sort of accepted this, and I'm not sure. It's funny, like it's both simple and complicated, but I sort of do accept that, that is a result of my efforts, is that people are going to look at it in a different way and look at me in a different way. And it may just boil down to, all of us know that we're going to be alive a finite number of minutes, and just recognizing that some person devoted and invested some of those minutes of their life to learning a craft, like that still does resonate, just because, this is your life. Like you're giving the minutes of your life to learn something and do something that others can't do as well. And so, that's interesting to me. And I sort of accept the result of that effort.
Mm-hmm. And another thing to me is like, especially dealing and working with predominantly a tech university. Where science and innovation, and most of the students are, their tablet is digital. It's like not pen and paper. And this, in a way, kind of shows them. And in the engineering students I know, it's like they respect it and they see it, to realize it's like there is a lot of value in the analog, even when it comes to them to excel in the digital.
Right.
So, and that's why it's like and this is where I differed from my predecessor here, is there is no tech mandate to the arts gallery here.
Mm.
It's if I feel like it just depends on, are you speaking? I mean, am I serving this community? Am I serving these students?
Sure.
With what I show and how I put it together. But obviously, it's like my job is just to select great artists like yourself and make it.
People have this idea that technology equals electricity.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. Like oil painting is one of the oldest technologies in the world.
Yeah.
So understanding like that some technologies don't require electricity. Some technologies are about manipulation of physical material and not just digital information, like understanding that like this whole idea that a technology would become Jurassic or unusable is sort of crazy. Like, why would you avail yourself of every single technology that was possible, that was accessible to you? This notion that we can, if we can do it on the computer. Yeah, maybe you can, but should you? Is that the best way to do it? Like, there might be another way to do it that doesn't require, there's a level in your iPhone, you know what I mean? But like, is that better than a plumb line? No, it's just working or whatever. Like, so it's this notion that, like, I'm glad I know how to use a compass. Like, I know how to, so I mean, and like I'm glad I still know how to write in cursive. I'm glad I still have these other technologies that are available to me because, the electricity might go out.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about a painting, is that it's on all the time. It doesn't require, you don't have to plug it in.
Right.
You don't have to download a driver or something. There was a wonderful project by Elaine Rychek, who's a really, really great artist, one of the greatest artists who's alive right now. And he did this project with the Gardner Museum that was it was on CD-ROM. It was a Flash-driven project. You can't see that project anymore because Flash doesn't exist. So, what was the point? Right? So now it's over, right? And now it's lost to us. Right?
This is what, to go back to Brian's point. What's interesting about painting to me is just how primitive it is. It's a stick with hair on the end of it, pushing pigment around. And yet it's able to learn from all other technologies, like the more sophisticated technologies. It learns from it almost like a virus, like everything that's supposed to, kill painting and render it obsolete, like photography. Then painting just recalibrates, absorbs the aesthetic and the world of photography, and then gets stronger. Conceptual art, minimalism, film, video, performance, everything that's supposed to end painting can't really end it, I think, because it's so simple. And painting has had the ability to learn from all other technologies in this way that's kind of astonishing. So for me, like that's where the technology part comes in, and that's where me, like, being able, again, like populating this world of Timon of Athens through all these different characters, as I hit all the different technologies, like the Mistresses on top of everything else was about painting from a JPEG. The Appomattox pieces with the awful performances are like the relation of painting to performance. The T's a relation from painting to sculpture and so forth. So all that is interesting to me, the way painting is constantly able to observe and learn from other media and other technologies.
And also the way that it, just because it's painting, it doesn't have to be some sort of gut-wrenching emotional activity, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing I've always appreciated about the work, is that the work is about me. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like looking at your angst or your emotional stuff, right? Because people think that my mark is somehow equal to my emotional status. And it's, it's not, that's Rauschenberg proved that not to be true.
Yeah.
that to be true. So we're still holding on to painting as a sort of this site of personal expression, as
Right.
if painters are like, playing with their own Freudian shit and stuff like that, but it's not. It's a conceptual practice,
Yeah,
based in a different technology.
Mm-hmm. And one of the last things about technology is the word that pops up to me is like capacity. It's like as we practice more, we developed or advance. It's like that we have more capacity for more data in a way. And Craig, I think this is your fault when you gave me that leotard, the Inhuman, and I think there were. This is probably the only thing I can remember from it was when he was writing about capacity in relation to like technology, but also too, I was thinking about it in a way of time and being able to take on more and more, which we like, if we're talking about storage and everything, like with Moore's law, like everything gets more and more powerful every 18 months because it can, it has more capacity. Whereas say, Craig, with your Timon series, and we look at some of the first paintings, which are like the sketchbook, where you're just playing with there's a lot more open space to your merchant painting, to where is a more confidence, but also just more skill and capacity to show the multitude of what painting can do, but also like with capacity of like what still life can do.
That's absolutely true. And I mean, the distance in time, that's like over a decade between those pieces, like the first pieces. And I just learned to play my instrument better.
Right.
I mean, to put it in like simplest terms, like I started out having a certain kind of, initial capacity, but I just kept practicing, practicing, and then you get better at it, which is one thing that painting allows. Like if I was a dancer, like my career would be over, like my instrument would have failed. Right. But as an actor, maybe I would have been as well, or a singer, like the instrument changes, your tool doesn't last forever because it's your body. But with painting, even though it is bodily, it just you can last longer and can learn like forever. Like painting's never solved, you're still learning it. So for me, like I have increased the capacity in those merchant pieces for sure.
And also it goes back, Brian, to what Craig was saying about the demand. The work has a demand, and then painting rises to that demand.
Yeah.
Right.
And Steve, one thing I wanted to ask you about, and with your two concurrent shows, the show here, The Daily Practice of Painting, and your show at Alexander Gray, specifically with the floating heads, the heads that I remember you saying that it's kind of like ghosts or apparitions waiting to be claimed by the viewer.
Right.
And our, show here showing the, portraits, all the figures, all the heads are grounded, like they have shoulders and everything. Can you, talk more about like how you see those two different series, whether something is, those two different approaches to portraiture, or if it's more interesting just to talk about the idea of this making like the ghost of something, or this head waiting to be claimed, or the viewer like claiming these head.
I think a big part of it, Brian, is about erasure and the sort of the violence of erasure. Who gets to be present, who gets to survive. I'm a gay man of a certain age. I lived through, this is my third pandemic. Many of my friends died, and so like that sort of idea that that your life is sort of fraught, and that you could disappear at any moment, right? And so the kind of violence in those larger paintings, those larger Tuggen paintings, like the Penitent or the Hedonist, or in my thinking, the color is this embodiment of everything that has been removed, right? Sort of like synthesizing a scene down to its background color, like I did with Freddie Gray. But also having the activity of a personage trying to come forward, trying to exist without a body, trying to exist without a place, trying to survive without the apparatus of survival, you know? And when you see those paintings in concert with the paintings of people cruising each other, or maybe picking up each other, or getting into a fight and stuff like that, it shows you how fraught the world is. On the one hand, there's this possibility of connection and maybe, you know, pleasure and enjoyment. And on the other hand, there's the abyss, you know, and, you know, it's not lost on me that people were calling for the vice president's head on a pike. Like, that's a big part of what the work is about. It's about the sort of violent eruption of masculine power as a result of impotence, you know. It's a lot of what that work is about, you know. But I see that through my lens of my own subjectivity as the kind of person I am, the kind of life I've had. And the paintings really function in that way, to be a bit of a warning about what is coming and an affirmation of what has happened.
So I don't have any, thank you.
He's good that way. No, he's very good that way.
It's just like
Mr. Locke is tough to follow.
It's one of those things to where it's like I'm just listening and then I forget. There is no follow up. Yeah, I kind of want to, you know, I want to end with just, you know, talking about another big history in each of your lives, and that's like your role as educators, because this is something that you've done since the beginning, and how does, you know, your role as as an educator intertwine with your practice and you know, the development of the work? How does it feed you, or how does it coexist? Whoever wants to start first.
Craig, you go first.
Okay. Well, what I will say, I mean, I've had so many different types of jobs because I'm someone who just always had to have a job, and it's rare that I've had just one job. I've my whole life had more than one job simultaneously. A full-time job plus some part-time, or a whole cluster of part-time jobs. My last year in New York, before I left and moved to Georgia, on my tax returns, I had 13 jobs 13 employers that previous year. And those were just like the above board ones, you know, like, let alone when I was working for cash for like drywall contractors or whatever else. So I'm someone that's always had like lots of different jobs. And it is interesting what you say, because I thought I was going to be a museum and gallery worker, I thought forever. Like, I thought that I really enjoyed that work. And what's different, I noticed now in retrospect, I worked at the Guggenheim Museum, the Jewish Museum, the International Center for Photography, like a bunch of galleries. At the end of a day, working in a museum where I've been looking at Kandinsky's all day, or I've been looking at, Sue Williams paintings, or if I'm looking at work that I really, really love, at the end of the day, I would leave just full of energy. I'd be charged. I'd be refreshed. I really would be like charged up, because I've been looking at great work all day. And as an educator, it's a little different. And when I first started teaching full time, I noticed, like, at the end of the day, like, why am I so whipped? You know, why am I so exhausted? And part of it is just the output of energy that's required. It's a different type of job and a different type of energy expenditure. But the other part is I wasn't seeing Well, I like my students very much. I don't mean this in a dismissive way, but I wasn't seeing great work. Like, I wasn't seeing the Kandinskys. I wasn't seeing the Lisa Yuskavich or whoever. Like, that was not what my eyes were seeing all day. I was seeing people in the early stages. Like if somebody loved literature, but their job was like, if you love Spanish literature and your job was like teaching intro Spanish every day,
Yeah.
like that would there would be, you'd feel that in your head. And so if you love gorgeous drawing, Gorky drawings or like whatever, you love most gorgeous drawings, and then you're teaching intro to drawing, like it took some calibration for me to kind of figure out. It's like, oh, okay, I need to do a little bit of mental rewiring here as a teacher, so that I don't have that feeling of exhaustion or frustration or whatever, because the students they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're at the point they're supposed to be at. And my job is to help them, get a path toward, being better. But it did require some recalibration on my part.
That's really beautiful. Like,
Did I stall for enough time for you, Steve?
No. I never thought about it that way. I always wanted to. I came to teaching because, like Craig, I spent years as a secretary. Like, I loved being an executive assistant and a secretary, and then I could work, and then I could leave work and then go to the studio and paint, right? But I got a teaching job very early after I got out of graduate school, and I just fell in love with teaching. I just fell in love with it. I loved everything about it. I loved writing the curriculum. I loved teaching the lessons. I loved talking to the students about their work. Like, I loved all of it. And I am very fortunate that way, that teaching wasn't a job to me. It was a profession. And I felt like very early on, I decided that I was going to have an academic career, that I wanted to be an academic, and that I wanted to, write papers about art and think big thoughts about culture and stuff like that. I wanted to do that. And I also sort of knew that I would be making these paintings that, like Craig said, like no one was interested in, no one really cared about. And that was fine, that I would just have this kind of life where I would teach my classes and love my students and encourage them and support them and write them recommendations. And then I would have this career where I was making paintings that no one ever saw. And then I would do that until I was like 90, and then I would die. And then some graduate student would discover me after I was dead. And then everyone would get really interested in my work or something. I thought that's what was going to happen. And I was completely fine with that, right? And I'm still kind of fine with that. Like, I don't really, I think that if there's anything I can say about teaching, it does require a tremendous amount of energy. And the older I get, the less energy I have, which sort of makes me sad. So I know that I'm probably not going to be able to do it forever, or I may have to do it in a reduced way. But I really do love it. And I don't think it's I wouldn't say it was part of my practice, right? Because I think that people are paying like such an exorbitant amount of money to go to college, and they're not paying to be part of my practice. I would never say that. But I do think that there's something sustaining for me in watching people develop. That's the exciting part for me. As exhausting as it is, sometimes you come home and you think, that person finally learned how to make a nose, and you're just over the moon about it. You just feel like King Kong on cocaine or something. It's great.
Yeah, I would say, right, what you said, it's more like a balancing, and listening to you talk to the Georgia State students, although I can't remember exactly all the things that were said, what I do remember is the feeling like, I wish I had this person as a teacher. And I've had that experience with Craig. It's like, boy, I wish I had this person as a teacher. But then I just, copy all of his reading list and all that stuff from the students.
Well, that's the thing that young people don't understand, Brian. And I wish I could help them see it. Is that, you're at their best, your teacher loves you. He really does. They love you. They do all this sort of work just to try to get you to have, not to entertain you or to engage you like a social media sort of thing, but to really help you think and help you learn. And they really do love you. And they can't, you can't say that, because in the current moment, people will get all upset. Like, why are you loving people? Like somehow that's a problem. But, understanding that, your teacher really cares deeply about you, cares about your success, and they're not there to become rich. They're not there to ruin your life. That's not why anyone does this job. They do it because of love. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to make money, you would learn how to code. Like if anybody wanted to make money, that's what I would do. Yeah. I certainly wouldn't be teaching. If I wanted to make a lot of money, I'd be coding.
Yeah. And that's now on shaky ground too.
Yeah.
There's always a recalibration that you have to do. But I had to teach for 1 year when I was at FSU, and that happened to be during the pandemic when we went teaching like foundations of sculpture.
Oh, online? And teach it online?
Fortunately, when everything closed down, we already had a plan. They had a plan. So what I had to do was kind of change it to where, basically it was more of experience what they would be doing if they were artists out in the real world, right, is improvising. Right. And that's why it's like I picked like the Equilibrium series and Facility and Weiss, to where they would balance objects that was in their home and take photographs of it.
Yeah.
And as a way of also teaching them the lesson of how photography is can be an extension of sculpture. It's like a lot of sculptural, a lot of performances that we see, we only experience them, or the majority of the audience only experiences through their documentation.
That's a great lesson, Brian. That's a great lesson.
But I really enjoyed it. And fortunately now it's like I still get to interact with students, but I don't have the demands on my time like you and Craig do, because it is a full-time job, along with the full-time job of a studio. Mm-hmm. And it is a balancing. So like you said, it's like, it's great when the young people, like, they feed you energy. Mm-hmm. and you can see is like, oh, this person is learning.
That's the best part.
And that's like one of the things that I like about being in a research institution, like doing visual art shows at a research institute, even one that's very diverse globally, but also academically. I mean, there's students studying agriculture, how to feed new generations. It's like dealing with water management, of course, aerospace engineering, all those things. And then we have a architecture, theater school, and performing arts. So it's having that range of minds with these different questions. It's great.
I would love to talk to a class full of farmers about art. Yeah. I think that would be so great.
Oh yeah.
That would be great.
I did a tour of the agricultural students for the previous show, Lillian Garcia Rogue, looking at her Banyan paintings, and Susanna Coffey, who
Susanna was my teacher.
Yeah, mine too. Mm-hmm. And she curated a group show upstairs of like more of cityscapes of different of a lot of her former students, and taking the agriculture students through to kind of pick out like things like they might see in their day to day. And so that's, the opportunities like that happen here. And those are things like, I grab onto when I see them and stuff. Well, I really wanted to thank you both, for all your time today and sharing, and also sharing your work, with the students here. I mean, we've had like incredible like response, but also all your recent successes and everything is well deserved on both accounts.
Thank you very much, Brian. The shows look great, so I was happy to say yes when the offer appeared. I said yes right away.
To show with my dear friend, get different eyes on the work. It really means a lot to me. It really does.
It was truly great.
Yeah,
and everybody should go to Alexander Gray Associates and Steve's show,
and then immediately get in an Uber and go over to Freight and Volume and see.
Right. But Steve's first because it closes December 17th. And Craig, when is your show close?
I think December 30th,
30th. Well, they can see it in the same day.
Yeah.
Just go. All right. Well, thank you all. I think that went really well.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Right. Craig, go to your hotel room and get some sleep, will you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to do that soon. I think my room should be ready by now.
It better be.
Oh, you did that in the lobby?
I'm still in the lobby, man.
Like a hooker. He's in the lobby. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just waiting for somebody to come by and take him to a room. Right?
Yeah. Looking for that next series. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's coming.
All right.
All right. Well, you two have a great day.
I'll talk to you soon.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.